Hello, everyone. Welcome to our LCC Community Engagement webinar that we're hosting today. We thought it would be a great opportunity, right as the grant cycle is about to open up. A lot of local cultural councils have been asking a lot of questions about how to interact with the community and how to support them better. And we understand that, with the current pandemic that's happening, social distancing and utilizing technology has been quite a challenge, not only for you, but for us as well. And we're here to kind of learn together and to have like a discussion about it. So this is the agenda for today. So first, we're going to have an introduction to the community initiative. Some newer members who, just came onto the Local Cultural Council might have some questions about what that is. And we kind of want to start the conversation by asking ourselves why community engagement and why it's important. And we'll go into elements of intentional community engagement, ways to practice this. We're going to give some examples about how to cultivate partnership networks that could be useful for local cultural councils. And then we'll be able to hear from our special guests. Right now we have speakers from the Medford Arts Council, Springfield Local Cultural Council, and the Worcester Arts Council. And we will have a question and answer portion, and we're going to be able to share some resources. So the community initiative is something that's relatively new to the Mass Cultural Council, and we basically, it supports our local cultural life through 3 key programs. So they're the local cultural councils, cultural districts, and festivals. And basically local cultural councils, they are the nation's largest grassroots network of more than 2,400 cultural agents in cities and towns who provide resources, make connections, spearhead programs, and direct funding to individuals and organizations that have or have the potential to have the most impact in the cultural life of their community. And basically linking all these 3 programs is really important for us at the Mass Cultural Council, because it basically helps us develop long-term perspectives about the people who we serve, right? So we really do believe that everything starts at the ground level, and we are able to kind of strengthen our impact as a state arts agency in that way. This is our team right here. I feel like every time we have like a webinar, a community check-in, we'll always introduce ourselves. But again, this is our team. We have Lisa Simmons, who's our program manager. We have Luis, who is a program manager for cultural districts. And then we have our program officers. We have Nina, myself, Timothea, Ricky, and Veronica. And these are just basically a map of where we work. So each of us, we work with local cultural councils all across the state. And it's color coded, and you'll be able to see where we work specifically. So I'm gonna now pass it on to Nina, my colleague.
Hi, everyone. So why community engagement? So whenever you're working in relation to a place, it's really important that you're engaging with people of the various communities that are in those places. So in the case of LCCs, you're supporting arts and cultural initiatives, as well as in some cases, creating programs for folks in your municipalities. So it's really essential that your funding and programmatic decisions are informed by community members to ensure that you're fulfilling the needs of your community. So what are some reasons behind intentional community engagement? So one is to build knowledge and awareness. And so no matter how long you've been a part of a community, there's so many changes that happen in terms of that particular local community, in terms of the regional context, as well as the state and national context. And so places are in flux, and this is not only in terms of demographics, but also industries and economies and community development needs. So that's why it's good practice to check in, to listen and learn to your community members. And this is actually the reason why we decided to make it mandatory for all LCCs to do community input and engagement on an annual basis, so we understand that there is change happening across the communities in our state. Another reason is that community engagement can build relationships. So engagement isn't just about collecting information. It's also about building bridges between various community groups, as well as with regional and state partners, so you can leverage each other's experience and resources for the betterment of the community. It also strengthens advocacy. So engagement builds civic interest and also civic will in supporting arts and culture, especially if people feel like their input and commitment matter. It also enables accountability. So one important goal of the LCC program is to support programs that provide public benefit. Without engaging different members of the community, it's really hard to say whether or not you're actually providing public benefit. And related to that is that good community engagement ensures that a broader representation of community voices are being included in the decision-making processes when you determine, what programs you fund and what sort of council programs that you shape. So good engagement invites people from various backgrounds and various sectors into a conversation around arts and culture to voice their vision for a vibrant and inclusive arts and culture environment in their communities. So next slide, Timothy, please. So what are the elements of intentional community engagement? So, and feel free actually to add to the chat if there are any good principles that you follow as an LCC when you think about and practice community engagement. So there's multiple channels of access to share feedback and ideas. So we know that, just one type of outreach isn't sufficient in accessing a broad population within your community. And so it's good to allow for multiple channels of access so that people have different ways in which they can reach the LCC and have that conversation with you. Also, it's important to build awareness around who is included and excluded. So I know that it's super exciting when you get a bunch of responses, and that's amazing, and it shows that you have done effective outreach. At the same time, it's also good to go through the responses and to try to figure out which voices aren't being represented in the responses that you gather, and to really identify if there are groups or organizations that are being unintentionally excluded from the conversation. There's also, as mentioned before, broadening your outreach, and this ties into what we were talking about figuring out who's included or excluded. And then also, it's really great practice to see community engagement as building a collaborative relationship, especially when you're engaging with community partners. And this speaks to the difference between relational community engagement versus transactional. So when you're talking to community-based stakeholders, it's really great if you include them in a conversation. What they see is the context for arts and cultural development, how it relates to what they're doing, and how you might potentially build something together. And again, rather than just seeing it as a way to get information, seeing it as a way to build those connections and bridges. And then the last important thing is that it is a continual process of listening, engaging, and learning. And so, as we mentioned before, there's always things that change within the community. There might be new groups of folks moving in. There might be artists actually, migrating towards your communities. There might also be different strategic planning conversations happening around, let's say, vacant buildings that the city or town wants to activate with different types of programs, or there might be conversations around artist studios or maker spaces in development. So it's always good to be in the process of listening, engaging, and learning from the stakeholders within your community. Next, please. So how can LCCs practice community engagement? So a big thing that LCCs do is act as a conduit for information and resource sharing. And so definitely see yourselves as a hub for information and resources when talking about arts and culture, but then also when talking about different projects that might be related to community development and the arts. I know a lot of LCCs create surveys, which is really great. There are LCCs that do a combination of paper surveys or web-based surveys. and some LCCs that really make use of pushing these surveys through social media. There's also in-person gatherings or workshops that you can organize as a way to practice community engagement. And so, you can invite folks to a conversation or a meeting that takes place at city or town hall. You can also lead a facilitated session. And in some cases, like there have been some LCCs that have invited a third party, so an organization's facilitation or an artist that has facilitated a conversation around what people envision for arts and culture in their community. So you can think of about it in a more like dynamic, interactive way. And then also informal conversations with local nonprofits, businesses, and community hubs. And so there's so many people within a community. And I think, in most cases, people appreciate being invited into a conversation and just having coffee or just stopping by a business and talking about sort of what they see, what they're experiencing in terms of the arts and culture experiences in their particular place. There's also the virtual medium, which we'll hear more about from our guest speakers, because a lot of meetings are taking place through a virtual platform right now. And so there are LCCs holding meetings that are broadcasted on cable access TV channels. We don't know if there are any LCCs doing community engagement through radio, but it's an idea that we thought might be potentially interesting, especially for areas without steady access to band. And then, of course, there are multiple meeting platforms that people are using. So Zoom, Facebook, Instagram Live, and also certain municipalities might require you to hold public meetings through a specific platform. So we'll hear from our guests more about the virtual engagement that they've been able to do. I just clicked on my computer. So cultivating partnerships. So also, when you're thinking about community engagement and thinking about the broad spectrum of stakeholders that you might think of approaching, it might be helpful to think of your own roles as LCC members. So next slide, please. So, at minimum, LCCs need to have at least 5 members. And something that we all know is that LCC members, each of you wears multiple hats. And so there are LCC members that are on their planning commission, that are on their environmental activism board, that are on like the historical preservation board, or that are part of neighborhood associations. And so LCC members, you have your own personal relationships that you can consider when thinking about how to pull others into the conversation around arts and cultural development, as well as how you can utilize your personal relationships to get word out about the local cultural council. And so you can see in this image that, there's varieties of like relationships. And so some relationships might be stronger than others. So just kind of like parse through the relationships that you have as LCC members within your community and try to think strategically around who you might approach and for what reason, and start involving them, inviting them into a conversation. Next slide, please. And so it's also helpful to think of like the multiple scales of partnerships. And so like you have the LCC, and then there are municipal partners that you might consider. And so this obviously isn't a comprehensive listing of every single partner that you could approach. But for example, among municipal partners, you have the Department of Parks and Rec, the mayor or town manager, Department of Community Development and Planning, City Council, Councils on Aging, select boards, public libraries, public schools. You can also broaden that view and start thinking about community partners. So who are the community nonprofits in your municipality? Chambers of Commerce are really great entities to tap in terms of their relationships with businesses. There are also local arts and creative collectives, local artists, designers, makers. Don't forget about the maker spaces where there's a lot of creatives in those buildings. Also the local housing authorities, and of course, local businesses. And then expand that a little bit further, and you also can think about regional partners. And so every municipality is within a catchment area of a regional planning agency. Same thing goes for regional tourism councils. There are also community development corporations that work closely with different communities, and also community foundations that have been doing a lot of work around arts and cultural programs and funding. And then don't forget about the state partners. You obviously have us, the Mass Cultural Council. There's also Mass Creative, our advocacy partner in supporting arts and culture. And then of course, legislators. And when you're thinking about establishing relationships with legislators, definitely make sure to connect with the legislative aides, because they'll be there for you, and they are the ears and the connectors between the state and the legislators. So those are the partners to think about.
Great. Thank you, Mina. And now we will be hearing from the Medford Arts Council, the Springfield Cultural Council, and the Worcester Arts Council. So Mina gave a really great overview of how local cultural councils can specifically participate and engage with the practice of community engagement, which is really important, but it's very broad still, right? So these are just going to be some really great examples of how specifically those have been done in communities. But right now, I just wanted to introduce Stephanie and Danielle. They are the co-chairs of the Medford Arts Council.
Hi, everyone. I am Danielle. I am also a co-chair of the Medford Arts Council. So just kind of jumping right in here. So thinking about ways that we focus on community engagement, you know, a couple of the big ones that we really pushed, especially in 2020 with COVID, social media has been our friend this year. And we've definitely been trying to utilize it in new creative ways. And a couple of things that we've been doing recently is highlighting a featured artist. So that includes just kind of like a quick introduction to an artist, their work, and just their process and relationship to art in their community. And then artist interviews, which is something that we've been exploring lately. Through Instagram, we've been doing just, again, a Q&A, but offering it in this video format, just introducing our community to specific artists that we're highlighting. We just did one recently on Amanda Baird Garcia, who I'll talk about our relationship with her in a little bit, but she just recently did some art in Medford, and we were really excited to kind of share a little bit more about her as a person and as an artist. Community events, a little less frequent in 2020. In the past, we've felt that this has been a really great way to connect with people. I feel like last fall we went to the Mystic River Festival, and I heard time and time again, oh my gosh, we had no idea that you guys existed. And so I think that these are really great ways to kind of like Mina said, reach a broader audience in a different way. I think having a physical presence in our community definitely broadens our net of who we're reaching out to and connecting to. And then, so Tufts is in Medford, and so they host a community, or had been hosting a community day every fall, and that was something else we've participated in, as well as West Medford Open Studios. So those are just a couple examples of different community events that we have attended in the past. Not so much this year, but they've been really great ways, again, to just show up and be present and have a face to who we are in our community. And then Steph, do you want to talk a little bit about neighborhood mapping?
Yes, like physically visiting. Recently, we wanted to reach out to businesses to foster collaborative relationships. So I took an opportunity to visit one of the squares and talk to one of the members of the Chamber of Commerce who owns a business in one of the squares. And this was so informative, and having the personal relationship of just stopping by. He introduced me to 8 different business owners, and we had such great conversation. And as a result of the conversation, we heard a lot of the stories of multi-generational families who lived in the neighborhood, who have owned businesses over time, and learned a lot about the history of Medford. So just conversations, visiting people, hearing people's stories, seeing how they're connected to their community was really helpful in building a relationship. And what I learned was there was a strong desire for public art. Each business owner wanted to collaborate with an artist, but we wouldn't have known that if we hadn't have met in person. Okay,
Yeah, and then unfortunately, we did not participate in Art Week this year. We had all great intentions. And then obviously timing with the pandemic just really didn't work out for us. But we had really great ideas to do this really collaborative drum festival with a local nonprofit, and really inviting community members to participate in a drum circle and just really engage our community on a very artistic level, and then also in ways that we can just show more of what we can do with our community. And we were really excited to bring Terry Lynn Carrington. She's originally from Medford. For those of you who don't know, she's a drummer currently living in New York, but is from Medford. And the local Chevalier Theater offers up basically a couple nights of community space a year, where it's basically free of charge. And so we just decided to take advantage of that. We invited Terry Lynn and her band to come in and do a Q&A and a performance, and it was going to be great. But again, you know, just didn't happen, but an example of something that we were working towards and excited about. But there's always 2021.
Wanted to share about that, how that came to be.
Yeah.
A community stakeholder coming to a meeting and sharing their ideas and giving us knowledge about, you know, people who were born in Medford, artists that were born in Medford who have reached a global level, an international level, and how could we tie that into neighborhood events. So this actually came from inviting a stakeholder to a meeting and hearing their views, and then us just following up on the idea. And then it snowballed into more conversations with the community and them expressing their idea that they wanted a drum festival that was similar to the one in Asheville. So we just kept listening and kept creating along with people who attended the meetings and voiced their concerns about what art events they wanted to experience.
Right, which I think is a great segue to just staying involved. Like Stephanie said, it's really just maintaining those conversations and collaborations that, you know, come across, whether it's within, you know, municipal departments or just local organizations that we come across or are personally involved in or have a connection with in some way. We've recently become more involved with the Chamber of Commerce and trying to strengthen some of our business partnerships. We have, our city council has a subcommittee for arts, history, and culture. And we recently reached out to them and invited them to come and talk to us about ways that we can all work together to leverage arts and culture in Medford. And an idea that came out of that was exploring the idea of a % for art ordinance in Medford. This is, we're at the very early conversation stages of this, but it's something that it's nice to see them looking for ways to really elevate arts and culture in Medford and work with us. And then a project that we've been working on for a while, again, it was kind of stalled due to the pandemic and we're trying to pick it back up again, is a collaboration with the Office of Energy and Environment in Medford. There's an area of capped land or land that needs to be capped with concrete. And they came to us and said, we don't want to just leave a slab of concrete. What are some ways that we can figure out to kind of make this a more interesting, usable and beautiful space? So we are exploring and working with an artist to put in a labyrinth, which again, we had several public meetings about, presented some ideas, and it, because there are resident abutters right near this area of land, more peaceful, quiet space was definitely something that we heard what the public wanted. And so we are settled on the idea of a labyrinth and are trying to figure out ways to kind of make that work with an artist and with the city. And then our local Parks and Recreation Department, we've reached out to them about kind of beautifying some of the baseball fields and parks within the city, basically painting murals on concession stands and dugouts, and hopefully maybe even painting basketball courts someday in the future. But again, just reaching out to these local organizations and departments within the city about ways that, you know, we can all kind of work towards the same goal. You know, we did hear from the Parks and Rec department that these certain parks and baseball fields look a little bit tired, and we said murals are a great way to kind of bring some vibrancy to those spaces. So that's something that we're also have in the works. Stephanie,
yeah, I was going to just say a lot of these projects take time and a lot of energy of attending a lot of public meetings. You know, we stay clued in to the City Hall website. When are these departments having their annual meetings and their public meetings? And we actually make sure that we're there so that we can show that we're interested and that art and culture has a face to a name at these public meetings.
Exactly. So just diving into our community input and just how we kind of gather that data. Our monthly public meetings, we're always, you know, like we had said previously, reaching out to people, inviting them, seeing who shows up and seeing what comes of it. I mean, gathering input that way. Our survey that we put out this year, like Stephanie mentioned, business feedback, and then our festivals and events. And that's pretty much how we have kind of pulled together our priorities for this year and similarly in years past. And then Steph, do you want to talk, I know you touched on it a little bit already, but just a little bit more about some of the feedback that you received when you did a lot of the face-to-face stuff.
Yes, I wanted to share my experience of an actual mapping of a neighborhood. So I took a day of just walking through a Medford Square and taking pictures of just what I saw, just noticing. And I took pictures of spaces where we had planned to do a mural. This picture on the right is a mural that was already in process before I joined the Medford Arts Council. We're planning to do a mural here. But walking around the neighborhood gave me information that I didn't receive just attending monthly meetings. Just mapping a neighborhood is very informative. Seeing how much traffic goes through there, where highways are near there, where the businesses have empty windows. Could you go to the next slide?
Yes.
There you see a sidewalk that could have haiku poetry on it. You see a fire hydrant that could be painted colors. One of the business owners spoke to me and said they don't like these ugly hydrants in front of their business. They'd like to have them colored and collaborate with an artist. There were accessibility issues where you saw a car parked, a disabled spot parked next to a driveway. And the business owners informed me that, you know, people who were handicapped would get out and they're in danger of walking right into a car. And there was no signage, there was no lines on the ground indicating that there was a disabled spot there. And that's some place where an artist could actually help with problem solving with some of the engineering issues that exist in the city. Another brick wall on the side of a business that a business owner showed me that they would be willing to collaborate. Can you put in the next slide, please. Here's a parking lot with no lines and 2 blank walls. So the business owner just walked me around and showed me that this parking lot has no signage and no one knows where to park, and that businesses feel like this area is kind of, I don't know, a no sign zone. It just could use some vibrancy, you know. And here on the right, another open window of businesses. This is just an empty space. Who owns this building? Maybe there could be a conversation with them about initiating an opportunity for an artist to display art in their window. Next slide, please. There was a conversation with the community liaison at City Hall about painting the Jersey barriers, because a lot of the restaurants had to move their indoor seating to outdoor, and the city expressed interest in beautifying the city. They came to us for advice. So here was another opportunity for an artist or a request for a proposal to connect within our network, the businesses in Haynes Square with the artists that attend our meetings. Here's a bench. We put together a slide presentation for one meeting showing the potential of using benches as a public art display. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Steph. That's lots of really great information that is interesting. When you're on foot, you see your community sometimes in a whole different perspective. So just a little bit about some of that input that we gathered, including input from the survey results. One major thing that we felt was important to reevaluate for our funding priorities was something we defined as cultural equity and diversity. And as a council, we felt it was important, given the systemic racism and the resurgence of Black Lives Matter. And also historically, we've always recognized that our grantee pool was not diverse. And getting our survey results back, our community felt similarly. 90% felt that this was important to our funding priorities, and then 85% felt it was a factor that would lead to cultural vibrancy in Medford. So that just reinforced something that we felt as a council and already kind of saw, but having our community mirror that back to us and say, yes, this is important to us too, was really important as well. And then just pulling from that, I just wanted to highlight a couple community voices that we gathered from our survey, and just seeing how people really do recognize the importance of art and artists in our cities, and the impact that they have. We heard a lot of interesting feedback and connections that some folks were making about the challenges of COVID and systemic racism, and how art can kind of bridge the gap in a lot of these struggles that we're currently facing, and that there's an opportunity that exists there to kind of explore, which was really nice to hear. And then I won't read this to you guys, but this is basically how we defined cultural equity, diversity, and inclusion for us moving forward. We had a subcommittee of council members who kind of got together and hashed this out and brought it back to the rest of the council, and we decided that this was a good definition for us moving forward for this particular topic. And then our rest of our priorities, public art was really important to folks, enhancing the vitality of our squares and business districts, partnerships and collaborations with projects, and then projects that serve the humanities and science and technology were also important aspects. Thinking about revitalizing our squares and public art, two of our major priorities are something that we look to for grantees to submit to us, but something that we also think is important as a council. Last summer, we had done this project, Electrical Box Landscapes, with Sophie Tuttle and Gary Roberts, two local artists. And it involved a lot of community engagement. Sophie included images of the Mystic River and local flora and fauna, and utilized community input and feedback in order to decide what exactly was going to go on these boxes. And then Gary developed and wrote haikus based on the information that Sophie collected. So it was a nice kind of well-rounded approach, and they are beautiful and stunning to look at. And so this year we decided to expand that project, and 2 new artists were given several boxes in different sections of Medford. We had South Medford and West Medford that we approached this summer. This summer. And Amanda Baird Garcia did South Medford, and she did these really powerful images of women and just empowered messaging on them. And she's done a really wonderful job, and it's been a real joy to see these in our neighborhood. And then Destiny Palmer did these really wonderful abstracts in West Medford. She's actually from West Medford originally, and she had originally intended to involve the community in a hands-on approach when she submitted a proposal, but it just didn't end up panning out with COVID. So, but they're still stunning and beautiful, and a great addition to our community. Stephanie, do you want to talk a little bit about adapting to change in Medford?
Yes, one of the reflecting questions that Timothea had emailed to us was, how do we respond to the changes that are happening in the world, in our neighborhood? And previously through our surveys, we had heard about, this idea of old school versus new school, older generations and the new generations, and how is creativity being expressed in public spaces, whose voices are important, whose are excluded, whose are included. And so can you go to the next slide? These are some of the, by attending other public meetings and activist organizations such as Mobilizing Medford and Medford Connects, connecting with key members in Medford who are on the front lines of activism, attending Black Lives Matter rallies ourselves, and you could not ignore through social media and also in our neighborhood through the rallies and the protests, the response to the murder of George Floyd. So being artists who are sensitive to the cultural changes and societal changes around us, we felt it was a responsibility to respond and look at our local priorities again. And also just, it sparked conversations with our meetings, because we all know we're affected by the environment we live in and the world we live in. Can you go to the next slide, please?
That's actually it for us.
That's it. Okay.
Great, thank you so much. So right now we are going to have Ben Smith, who is a commissioner with the Springfield Local Cultural Council, and we're going to ask you specifically about your pitch night, which is a very interesting example of how to engage the community in a very targeted way.
Yes. Hello. Pitch night for us is an amazing evening. It takes about 3 hours, where we have the community come together, the different artists who have submitted grants to the Springfield Cultural Council, and each of them get a chance to actually speak with the counselors, which is the grantors, which is myself and Rosemary, Andrew, and other members, where they are meeting the person who's going to be responsible for actually leading their grant into being funded. So what happens is we are kind of their mentors, and we work with them directly. And the beautiful thing about the night is that you have all the artists coming into the room and they're networking. So some of them have not even thought about collaborating, but now there's collaborations that are building right there at that moment. They're sharing information, and they all introduce themselves. They get the first hour is all introduction, and the second 2 hours is their one-on-one with the different commissioners. At that time, they have 3 minutes to actually show us the information they have, to show us why we should fund their grant. But better, moreover, it's an opportunity for us, the commissioners who actually already read their grant, to ask specific questions, something that we may not have understood when we was reading their grants in the first time, that we get the information directly from them. So this information session is vital for our process, because it gives us a face-to-face relationship with the people we are funding. Now, the key things about the grant night also is that it's of course it's before we vote. So now we have, not only do we have read the grants, but we've met the people who have submitted the grants as well, and we got additional information. They may bring their brochures, videos, their laptops. They do a presentation. So we are right there, sitting there, and anything that we need to know is on the table at that moment. And it makes it so much easier for us to decide on how to fund the grants. Now, the first thing also is that whoever the person who submitted the grant meets with, as I said earlier, the commissioner becomes their mentor, and they work with them not only before they get funded, but all throughout the funding process. They keep the communication doors open. So if there's any questions or changes of date or any information on when their event is happening or how to actually change their event in case funding wasn't exactly what they wanted or what they needed, we are the persons who can actually direct them into the right direction. And that's the beautiful thing about Pitch Night. It not only gives them a chance to meet the commissioners, but it also gives them a direct connection on how to actually succeed with their grant.
Great. So we did have a question, and we just wanted to ask, could anyone attend Pitch Night?
Yes, anyone can attend Pitch Night, but the people who actually submitted the grants are the ones that will be speaking one-on-one with the mentors. However, at the last Pitch Night, there were people who came in and they were actually looking to submit grants for the next cycle, but they did not meet the deadlines, or they just kind of wanted some more information, and it was great for them to be there in the room.
Great. And it's also, so I know that you do this every year. How are you planning to do a virtual Pitch Night this year?
This year we have talked about a virtual Pitch Night, but we need it to be as successful as far as networking is concerned, as far as community building is concerned as well. Of course, the key thing is doing it on Zoom and actually making sure that we can actually share a lot of information with all of our people who are submitting grants. And Springfield gets a number of grant requests, so many grant requests. But the thing about it is that trying to get us all into a room and to Zoom. We're probably going to break it into our commissioners and let our commissioners actually meet with the people that the grants that they're reading. And each one of our commissioners read about 35 grants. So that's pretty much, it's 1 to 35 prior to funding.
Great, thank you. And I guess I have one more question. So I know like all cities and towns are changing all the time. How are you making sure that the community knows about Pitch Night and the grants?
One of the key things that we do about letting the city know about Pitch Night and the grants is that we do a press release, and it is in our local newspaper. But not only that, we have done community engagement over our radio station. We have a local radio station, WTCC, and we actually do a call in, and we actually share some information on our grants and on when the deadlines are and how to actually access the information. So we try to reach out to the community on all levels with our press release and with our information that we share on the radio.
Thank you so much. I think that's really unique and really interesting. So we might have some follow-up questions for you after the meeting, so we can share it out with all local cultural councils.
But one of the key things to add in quickly is that we're a small council, but we get so many grants. So sometimes it's the avalanches of grants. It's questionable
Yeah.
with the
Yeah.
limited money that we receive, even though we're one of the largest amounts in the
Mhm.
yes.
Can I respond to one thing here?
Yeah.
So I love, Ben, how you talked about how pitch night, it's not just about the artists making a pitch for their projects, but really a chance for artists to get to know each other and to really like brainstorm with one another and to share ideas. And
Yeah.
one thing that I want to share with folks is that recently we surveyed LCC applicants from fiscal year 20, so both denied and granted. And one thing that came up was that artists are actually, or applicants, including artists, are actually looking for opportunities to network and to just connect with one another. So that's something to keep in mind as you think about different community engagement activities and gatherings that you're thinking of organizing. So thank you
Yeah.
for sharing, Ben.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. So right now we're at 12:50 and we're going to close out with Lisa from the Worcester Arts Council. And I just wanted to remind everyone, if you do have questions for these speakers, please just put it in the Q&A and we'll be able to send out, again, notes and a recording after. So Lisa, take it away.
Okay, we can do it. We'll do it quickly, guys. Thank you so much for inviting us to participate. We're excited. I'm going to share my screen. Maybe.
We've all been there, Lisa. It's okay.
Thanks, Benjamin. Oh, why is it telling me to open my system preferences? Okay, I think we're good. So, hi. I'm Lisa Malo. I'm the secretary of the Worcester Arts Council. I know the size of our councils might be different. Ours is 9 members. We currently have 2 open seats. And one thing I would love to ask all of you, if we could use the chat feature, if anyone else who has open seats on their council right now, I'm just curious, like maybe just drop the name of your council in the chat feature. And while you're doing that, I would love to share with you that our last 3 most recent council members who joined us found out about the opportunity from social media. So if you're not on social yet, maybe this is an incentive to hop on there. I know I'm going to talk a little bit about our specific community input survey, but to back it up a little bit, I think the Worcester Arts Council has been thinking, at least for the last year, about how we really intentionally connect virtually with the Worcester community. For us, that's been a few different things. We have an email list that I think is about 1,800 subscribers, let's say, although we haven't emailed that frequently. But for us, the main thing has been social, in particular Facebook and Instagram. Our Instagram following has more than doubled in the last year. It's not that it's wildly followed. I just shared that we just reached a milestone. We have 2,500 followers as of today on Instagram, which again, like that's not an intimidating amount, but for any of you who maybe follow Seth Godin, who's a famous marketer, if there's such a thing, he says all you need is 1,000 true fans. So I think it's about like being really intentional, obviously trying to build kind of the volume and audience there, but at the same time, it's okay that it's not that many people. So don't feel like you have to be all things to all people on social. We feel like in addition to things like attending events and planning our own council-led projects, that connecting with people on social really creates a unique opportunity for us of how the Worcester Arts Council is more visible in our community. So when we need new council members, when we're talking about grant opportunities, and any other events that we're planning, creating those connections between other artists or organizations in our community that we can be a vessel for that on our social. We've used it to build relationships with people. We've created conversations in our community and again, like really fostered more of that community by using social. I think it also helps increase accessibility in some ways. People who might have historically been familiar with what your LCC has done, what you were sharing, Medford, about like old school versus new school. I think that social is a way to hit those new school people in a lot of different ways, and then connect with new people. I also want to ask everyone, because I don't know, we are a follower of many LCCs on social. We will follow you all. If you drop your handles in the chat, I would just want to make sure we follow everyone who's on social. So if you have an LCC and you're on Instagram or on Facebook or on Twitter, just like drop it in there and I will pay attention to it after. I kind of want to, like, don't be intimidated by the word strategy here, y'all. Like, that makes it seem like we are super polished and know what we're doing at all times. It's really an experiment for us. I think starting last year, our main goal was just, can we be more consistent? So we had talked about things like, tailoring the content to Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, which we know are best practices like out there in the world to have content that is specific to each platform. But we said, why are we making it more complicated? How do we just be more consistent? And for us, that doesn't even look like posting every day. It's maybe a couple of times a week, and sometimes they're better than others. But just by focusing on consistency, we really have started to build our following and get more traction there on both Facebook and Instagram, I think, in particular. We also engage regularly. So whether or not we're posting content on our feed, we do obviously log in and start liking posts or commenting on posts. And I don't know if you all would be surprised by this, or posts from other people, I guess I should be clear. I don't know if you'd all be surprised by it, but people really love when their local arts council likes their post or comments on their post. They seem very excited about it, that we've paid attention to them. So I think it's just a way to sort of share the love and show that you're paying attention. And then when you're asking them to do something, they're gonna pay attention to you even more. I also think it's about being authentic. You can see from some of our posts, like, we can be a little cheeky. We've experimented with being funny. We've experimented with being heartfelt. And I wouldn't say that we totally have a voice, but I think it's about being who your local cultural council wants to be in your community and deciding on that as a group. And also, it's not quick. When I'm saying play the long game, like, we've been focusing on this for about a year. So when it came time to do our survey, we had much more traction to be able to reach out to people whose posts we'd been liking for a year to ask them to share our survey. I also think people want to help. I think it's easy for many folks to get excited about arts and culture in their local communities. So even if you haven't done that for a year, I think it's okay to still ask for it, but it certainly helps to have that sort of social equity in the relationship there. To my point about this is an experiment, we approach everything with the spirit of, like, this might not work. You can see some of these example posts here have 100 and something likes, and some have like 15, and we learn from it all and say what worked. And just because it has a few likes doesn't mean that it didn't work. It can still be valuable to you in lots of different ways. So you serve up the exciting thing with the Dolly Parton challenge that people get excited about, and then you say, hey, want to join the Arts Council? So it's kind of like giving them both of those things. When we got to our community input survey this year, and the Worcester Arts Council has done a survey for the past few years. I've only been on the council myself for about a year, I think. I know I should know the answer to this, but historically they've tried other things, but it has been a survey for at least the past few years. Participation hasn't been great. I mean, there were numbers as few as like 75 people who took it. In the past few years, it's been maybe 200. I think last year was about 240 something who took the survey. And we knew we had a lot of work to do to get more people engaged in taking the survey. Simply putting it out there was not nearly enough for us. We wanted it to be simple. We really tried to strip down how many questions we were asking to make it easy for people to take the survey. This year's survey was only 10 questions, about half of which are demographic related questions, not used to identify people, only to help us understand, do the people who took the survey reflect the population of Worcester, and like, where do we have more work to do? To, I think, Nina's point earlier about being able to acknowledge who participated in this and being transparent about, again, it doesn't mean the feedback we got is invalid if it was not as inclusive as it should or could be. It's just to acknowledge that we have work to do and figure out the places to do that. We also wanted to be engaging and make it fun for people to participate in. I mean, it's hard to get excited about a survey, although I felt really excited about it, but how could we make it something people would be, wanting to share and wanting to take? We definitely knew we needed to reach new people. Again, we just had not that many people take it in the past years, but also we knew that primarily white women who were wealthier from a particular area of Worcester were who had taken the survey in the past. So we really tried to get people outside of that sort of demographic and geographic group to take the survey. We wanted to get people invested in the mission, not just of the Arts Council, but like, how are you going to help us get more feedback in this survey? And here's why it's really important, because your answers really do directly impact how we allocate these dollars for arts and culture in Worcester. And with all of those things, like making it appealing and making it simple, we also didn't want to sacrifice the like deep insights that people can share with you in their answers to these surveys. So, how do we make it appealing? We approached it with a design eye and wanted to make it like look attractive to people. So we did design kind of a campaign look, although we tried lots of different things. So if you look at that purple post with the headphones, we thought of that like our orange fire festival square, but like not creepy or a fraud with cheese sandwiches. But we wanted people to like see this purple square and say, oh, I know what that is. Like that's something with the Worcester Arts Council at least. So that was the look, y'all. We did a lot to try to engage with community organizations. The number one thing I would say is we identified a list of about 75 community organizations. There were like churches, community groups, I mean, many different things. And we emailed all of them, asking them to share the survey. We also messaged lots of businesses or people we would call micro influencers. So people with maybe a smaller following on social, but they could still get several hundred people, several thousand people to see and take this survey. So we personally DM'd about 100, I think it was in the end, people we identified as people who have a larger following, whether it was local artists or businesses, like I said, and asked them to share the survey, and lots of them did. We leaned on our city a lot. So obviously, with everything going on with COVID in particular, you might imagine that the Worcester Arts Council's funding priority survey was not the city of Worcester's top priority in this time frame, but they do really, I mean, arts and culture in Worcester are hugely significant. We are lucky to have a cultural development office in the city of Worcester that really partners with us. So we leaned into them and did have to follow up, you know, a number of times to ask them to do it, but they helped us. And then the same thing, like we didn't know what would work. We tried lots of things and we talked about lots of different things, but we approached it with a spirit of experimentation more than like anything. We did have a goal, so we didn't really know how to set it, but we set a goal of having, sorry, I'm just checking the time. It's 1:01, I did not go as fast as I said I would. Our goal was to get 500 participants. The survey was live for kind of a long time. We extended it after the MCC guidelines, or the dates changed, I guess I should say, from September. I don't have to share any of this with you. We can skip this, but we got 1,020 responses. So we blew our goal out of the water, which was amazing for us and really gratifying. Thank you. Thanks for the applause, Stephanie. We really pushed for it. A huge increase over last year, our highest participation ever. And again, like that's really gratifying. We did have a raffle prize. So that's one thing. If I'm going to give you one tip, score a raffle prize and use that to get people to take your survey. We emailed our list. One thing our city did was they emailed all city employees, and that was really beneficial. We definitely saw a bump after they did that. Not all city employees are residents of Worcester, so we definitely saw people taking the survey who aren't residents of Worcester. It's still valuable, we felt, because they work in Worcester or visit Worcester, but the vast majority of our participants were from Worcester. We did all kinds of things. We tried local radio. I don't feel like it really worked for us. We definitely didn't see a bump. But I also think all of the things that you're reading here in the what didn't column, I wouldn't say that means don't do them. I think it means like what about it didn't work and how would we approach it differently next time. So I think even with the local radio, I would share, we did 15-second spots and we did it on a local like Spanish radio station, but we'd never done advertising there before. That audience really doesn't know who the Worcester Arts Council is. So to have a shorter spot on that channel, like I think there's changes we would make there. It's 1:02. Should I just like skip ahead? Y'all, we can talk about any of this. Just like DM us on Instagram. I'll explain any of this to you that you want to know about. The last thing I would say is like, it doesn't end with the survey. To me, it's like, now we have this thing. and who else, it's for us to develop our priorities. But I think the other thing is like, who else would benefit from this information? Like, how else can we share this with people? So we put a lot of time into putting together a report that would be easy to understand for people and, you know, accessible. I think it could be available to the public, but we could also share it with other arts and cultural organizations in Worcester. And so I can share the link to that with anyone who wants it, but we put together a report that's available on the City of Worcester website. You can go to worcesterma.gov/WAC, W-A-C, and it's available on there. And it makes the information digestible and interesting and really increases our transparency. Like, yes, we have funding priorities, but there's so much more valuable information from the comments to help people as they're developing their programming. And we know there are other groups in Worcester who are also hosting surveys right now that can harness our information to complement what they're trying to uncover. This felt super fast. Did it feel fast to you all?
That was amazing, Lisa. Thank you. Oh, just
we follow us on social, y'all, at Worcester Arts Council on Facebook and Instagram.
there are some questions that people have asked, but two things that I wanted to note. So Lisa, you were saying how there was a what worked and what didn't work, and how people shouldn't be discouraged on like the didn't column. And one thing that I want to say is, you know, like Benjamin also shared how the Springfield Local Cultural Council, they use radio, and it seems to work really well for them. So sometimes like these things work or don't work depending on the local context, right? And just because it doesn't work or has worked 1 year doesn't mean it won't work or will not work. Now I'm confusing myself, another year. So yeah, and you know, before Lisa, we were chatting about how, you know, it really sometimes takes some experimentation. And so don't be afraid to just try something and, you know, just see what the response is and have it be a learning experience. And one other thing that I wanted to quickly note is how Lisa had also mentioned other LCCs dropping in their handles in the chat. And so if you have social media handles, please do share them in the chat. And I also point out that among LCCs, you all are part of that network too. So, you know, really make use of drawing on the connections and the experiences of neighboring or regional or even like any LCC that you think is doing cool work. And there are some questions. So Arlene Fracca is asking, do you have subcommittees working on outreach, promotion, or social media? If anyone wants to talk about how they organize the work in their arts council.
We do on Worcester. We have 3 subcommittees. One is for events, one is for like social marketing and PR, and then the third is strategic planning. So I would say for the survey promotion, all of us were really expected to jump in and do that. So it wasn't like it was just relegated to the social committee, but we do have a social committee that's myself and another member, Dave Fillar, who are really responsible for like just our day-to-day management.
And I think this is a general question, but Arlene also asks, has anyone used Facebook groups to create connections among local artists?
We haven't yet, Arlene. I would say I've talked about it, at least for our grantees. We thought it could be an interesting space to like create separate groups for even our 21 grantees who have sort of specific challenges and needs related to the pandemic. But we haven't done it yet.
How about for Medford or Springfield?
We haven't done the Facebook groups. We do also have a subcommittee for marketing as well. And we also have a public art marketing committee, since that's something that we as a council on our own kind of initiative work towards. So different public art initiatives that we put on as the Medford Arts Council. We have people focusing on that as well.
And Benjamin, how about for the Springfield Council? I think you're on mute.
Sorry about that. At Springfield, we have not used for the Springfield Cultural Council the different organizations that are on Facebook. However, I know for a lot of the big murals, a lot of the artists, they were a lot of searching going online on Facebook for people who were creating the murals and different artworks that were in the city, and stuff that is coming up is stuff that was scheduled before pandemic to come up as well, but we have not used them directly.
Great. And Benjamin, I think we have one question for you. Did some of the artists at Pitch Night decide to collaborate on the project after seeing presentations from others?
Yes, we have had collaborations from artists on Pitch Night that actually have, I'm sorry, I'm getting a phone call okay, sorry about that. We have had people who have done collaborations.
Great.
Did I break up?
No, we got that
Okay.
clearly. Thank you.
And people who have met each other at our event, so definitely. And programs that actually did things together after getting funded, just different things that they knew they can piggyback off of each other's marketing skills and marketing energy. And that was one of the ways that they actually were able to justify spending less and actually gaining and meeting their goal.
Great, thanks.
Thank you so much.
Well,
Again, we just wanted to thank all of our guest speakers and everyone for attending. And we will be sending out notes and a recording after. And if you have any follow-up questions for each Arts Council, each local cultural council, feel free to follow up with us and we'll put you in touch with the right people.
I do see Rosemary Woods has her hand up.
Yeah.
Rosemary, we're plugging you into the conversation.
No hands. I just wanted to say thanks for everything. It's been so informative. And we've got to, I miss all of the cultural councils getting together. I've learned so much today. And good luck to everyone. Stay safe and welcome to the new norm.
the new norm, yes.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.